right, I guguess we'll go ahead and get started. We have a very narrowly defined panel up here, topic-wise, just opportunities in college sports, so just a few things to talk about. Some quick introductions. To my left, we have Sean Hegan from Learfield, Trish Tulloch from 160/90. We have Craig Sloan from Playfly Sports, Leah Macko from Powerade. Thank you. I'm just going to take a drink of this first.
Yes, everyone.
Yeah.
Delicious. Thank you, Leah. And Mandy Gill from Marriott. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, let's kind of jump into it. Big week for college sports. We had that monumental decision from Claudia Wilken in the House, Hubbard, and Carter cases. You know, what it means to schools and likely brands is that there's a massive overhaul coming in the college space. So I want to throw this up for everybody. Like, are we now going to start to see the formalized professionalization of college sports? You get to go first.
Well, I think simply as long as college students remain students and student athletes, it's not going to be completely professionalized. But I think we've been trending in this direction of more commercialization in college athletics for probably the last 4 or 5 years now. I think there's probably been more change in college athletics in the last 5 years than there were probably the 100 years before that. And I think this is hopefully, from where I sit and somebody who's relatively new to college athletics, I hope this is a step towards clarity, because it seems, and we've been talking a lot about it the last couple days here, it seems that some brands and marketers perceive college athletics as complex or complicated and kind of what's my point of entry. And I think the more that we can do to simplify that and make it easy for brands to engage in college athletics, that's a good thing for all of us. And I'm hopeful that these types of steps are taking us in that direction.
Trish?
You know, from a brand or an agency perspective, you know, if we're going to the direction of professionalization, what that means to us, you know, rights holders, Playfly, Learfield, they're getting more sophisticated, they're offering more, their offering looks more like the professional ranks, and so from a brand perspective, it's probably a good thing. You know, they're saying yes more than they're saying no these days, and so from our perspective, bring it.
Exactly.
Greg?
I think it's sometimes being talked about these days as professionalization is a bad thing. And I actually think it's, if done right, and that's what we're on the journey of, it's going to be a good thing, right? The fans will have better experiences. The difference between going, frankly, to a college football game on a Saturday and the amenities, the experience at a professional sporting event versus a college event, there's a pretty big gap there today. And that's going to narrow, and that'll probably narrow quickly. The student-athlete experience is going to continue to get better and the way that they're treated, but then also compensated. I don't see those things as necessarily a bad thing. And then for marketers, certainly for you all, the opportunity is going to grow immensely. It just is. We'll get into more about what happened post-House, but that idea that brands are going to have more opportunities to invest into meaningful assets is clear.
Leah?
Yeah, I think it's a step in the right direction for pay transparency for our student athletes, for setting a fair standard for the deals. For the immediate, the details around how NAL Go is going to work, who's vetting the deals as a brand, how are we getting set up as a payer, relying on 18-year-old athletes to put the deals in themselves.
What could go wrong?
A lot of trust to put into these young athletes. So I bet over the next year it's going to be a little rocky, but a year from now I can definitely see a great benefit from the passing.
So very similar. I mean, I think the biggest change, though, that they'll add would be the clarity, evaluation, and insights. I think will kind of be more of a level playing field, which I think will be helpful because we'll kind of see it be a little more fair across the sports when you're looking at the rev sports versus non-rev. So I think that'll be the interesting part when we start to look at valuation.
You know, it was reported this week that even a powerhouse athletic department like Michigan is facing a potential $27 million deficit for the next school year. Craig and Sean, I want to come to you just as, you know, having so many schools, multimedia rights there, like as you're now holding talks with athletic directors and school presidents, like how receptive are these folks to new entry points and, you know, whether it's patches and field naming rights to make up the revenue gap that's missing there?
I'll jump in. Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things. One is that the need is clear, And the alignment between the university and the athletic department is probably better than it's been, at least in our history, to see the world the same way on the need for revenue generation, and not at necessarily levels that are minor. They're going to have to be major moves, because ultimately at the end of the day, these aren't big seismic changes and differences. And some of their revenue streams are static, right? Their media rights for most of the Power Fours in particular are set for the next handful of years. And where else are you going to find big opportunities for those things? So the idea that they are leaning into innovation differently than they were maybe even 6 months or 12 months ago, not even just a few years ago, is real and tangible.
Sean?
I agree with Craig, and I think it's interesting because this is all playing out so publicly that it gives athletic directors a little bit of air cover, where maybe traditionally even the ADs themselves, who might have liked to have the revenue coming into the athletic departments, kind of stood their ground and said, we're going to hold with tradition, we're going to hold with, you know, kind of our standard of operating our athletics department and kind of keep brands to the side. But I think that everything, how it's playing out, is giving athletic directors that kind of cover with their universities, with their board of regents, whatever it happens to be, to have conversations about how they are going to fund these deficits, how they are going to fund the new responsibility that they have to paying student athletes or you know, providing funding for student athletes. But I think, you know, you mentioned Michigan as an interesting example, as a you know, one of the great you know, traditional historic athletic programs. I think even for a University of Michigan, there are ways to tastefully incorporate brands into that setting, into those arenas, into those stadiums, that ease their fans into it, that ease the athletic department into it, and over time they get more comfortable with it, and it just becomes, you know, kind of like it is in the rest of the world of professional sports and a lot of other colleges, more commonplace.
I think it'd be you know, interesting to see the alumni reaction if we're going to go for, I don't know, Powerade or Marriott Field at Michigan Stadium. I mean, there might be some.
I'm not saying we're jumping in 2 feet first. I'm just saying, you know, perhaps over time, because of the demands, the revenue demands, because of the needs, that I don't think there's any way they can't be at least a little bit more open-minded to it.
You know, we've seen a trend of athletic directors coming maybe more from, you know, the business side of not just sports, but just from areas outside of college. Is that trend going to accelerate more, you think? And like, what qualities does an AD need to have these days coming into a Power 4 job, maybe?
I think it could. I don't know if it necessarily has to, if they're into the mindset that they can find partners that can help them get to the end destination, right? There's still a whole side of the house that is about the student-athlete experience and compliance and all the things that still need to be managed very much in the same way. Managing the coaches, our jobs, Sean's mine both, are to take those pressures and weights off of them and create new opportunities for growth. And so the good news for especially the marketers in the audience, we query this all the time. Fans are not getting turned off by tasteful things that are being added to the game. So I heard Russell, as we were walking in, talking about the in-ice logos in hockey. We're very much in the hockey space at Playfly as well. No one stopped watching or attending because there were in-ice logos, right? And that created a tremendous opportunity with TV visible signage that's, you know, changed the game revenue-wise for teams.
I think we still want those athletic directors. I mean, it's great they're coming from different sides of the business, but like their job is to also take care of those student athletes.
Yeah.
And from like, I'm the mom of student athletes, so there's a little bit of bias there, but it's like when it starts to just mean the business, as a brand, we really make sure that like the integrity of the program is number one, that we're putting our name behind.
Trish, what's some advice that you're giving to your clients as far as current and potential future access points that might work at the college level?
You know, for when we work with brand clients, it starts with what are their objectives? You know, there are lots of entry points, and there's emerging entry points. NIL the last couple of years has become, you know, a viable one. But it does start with what are their objectives, and you know, there's a plethora of, you know, you can sponsor the NCAA, you can 80 some odd championships. You've got rights holders in schools and conferences, athletes themselves, but you know, I think it starts with what are they trying to accomplish and who are they trying to reach from a target audience standpoint, and how can they distinctly integrate their brand into whether it's a plethora of school partnerships to reach the avid Michigan fan, just how they can do it to integrate their brand in an authentic way. You might not be able to do it the same way as Powerade, you might not be able to do it the same way as an Allstate, but do it the way that authentically pulls through your brand.
Leah, Powerade has signed on as the official hydration partner, I love that by the way, of over 20 schools. Have you found that access point to be successful for you?
Absolutely. Partnering with college universities, and especially working with NIL talent in particular, has been a really key part of Powerade's strategy over the last few years. And we've turned the brand around and put it back onto a path to growth. And there's so much more opportunity. We've been focusing on basketball, both on the men's and women's side, and in college football. So excited to continue to expand our partnerships across more sports.
And I guess this is for Trish, Leah, Mandy, just from a brand perspective, do you see value in patches at the college level?
I think, yes, we love logos, but we are very passionate at not being a logo slapping strategy. It has to be a full 360 integrated marketing strategy, and a logo should be like one portion of that. And so, as Trish mentioned, really trying to find out what are the objectives that partner brings to us. Are they hitting we heard about Aflac mentioned this yesterday. It's not just about brand health and metrics and awareness, also the conversion for us as well. But a logo helps that, in stadium logos help that, patches could help that, but it should just be one piece. I think at Marriott, we really focus on, we want to be not just seen, but also remembered and felt. And so we need that feeling and that connection. With over 30 brands, it's hard to get our story across with a logo. If I quizzed you all on our properties, you might all fail. So is my husband. So we want to really make sure you start to understand that Ritz-Carlton is a Marriott property. So is the Moxie. And so getting those touch points and bringing our properties alive in each of these activations is really what's important.
I couldn't agree more about the logo slap. One of the benefits of working with NIL talent is it becomes a symbiotic relationship. We're helping grow their brands, and they're helping us grow our brands.
Trish?
I think jersey patches are maybe coming. They're not yet approved from the NCAA perspective, but coming. I think there's probably some brands that would look at that in terms of an entry point into college, in terms of building awareness. So if it's a brand that doesn't have awareness, if it's a brand that's trying to integrate into college, it's probably something a brand would look at. I think, it probably does need to be a little bit more than just a logo slap, and there's meaning behind it. So if there's a charitable tie or a donation tie of some sort, something that can create some impact.
I want to get a little.
Austin, you didn't ask us, but we're for it.
I do care what you think.
And if you're not a complex
I had checked that
brand,
off under yes earlier.
if you're not a complex brand and you see that logo all day long, right?
Yeah.
If it's Coke, if it's the bigger, but it's very easy to understand what that means. So I also think it depends on the brand.
I assume I can put Learfield down in the yes department.
100%. And I would just say, if we didn't know it before we got here, I think for Craig and myself, listening the last couple days about leading with brands and really understanding what's important to brands and what story are they trying to tell. If we lead with a jersey patch, we're going to have less success than we are if we're having a conversation about meeting the strategic objectives of our brand partners and prospects. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to be out there to listen first and not just take them what we feel like we need to sell.
I want to get a little bit deeper into name, image, and likeness. Leah, I want to start with you. Powerade, beyond being an NCAA level sponsor, you've leaned very heavily into this. You have, 40 NIL related packs just around that March Madness time. I think we have a slide to show some of what you were activating with during March Madness.
I do. I have a couple of examples. So our March Madness campaign this year is a really great example of how we take a tiered approach to activating NIL. So we work with the big superstars who have their national reach. So this year that was Flau'jae Johnson, who is a starting guard at LSU. She was part of the championship winning team a couple years ago. And she's also a rapper signed with Roc Nation. And so her team loved this activation because we looked at her as the whole person, not just as her as a basketball athlete, but really leveraged her talents as a very talented rapper. So we commissioned a bespoke hip-hop track called What It Takes, ladders up to our brand positioning, It Takes More, and then worked with a rap multimedia company called Lyrical Lemonade to produce this really awesome music video. Full-length music video, we cut it down to a 30-second spot, and then we ran it as part of our national campaign. So,
I think we have that spot.
yeah.
Here we go. I know it take more, so I don't care about what others do. No one causing trouble when I'm drafted to the W. I've been working hard, they act like they don't see 10-hour day. No, I got the juice with NIL, I'm sipping Powerade. It take more, it take four when you soar to your core. I got ore on the court, from the port, past the torch, yeah. They know I'm the sickest, now they gotta turn their doses up. I know how I feel to wear that ring and throw that trophy up. It take more, it take four, it take more.
Well, Leo, you have 40-plus athletes. Are you taking a tiered approach? Because Flaugier is obviously huge, but what kind of approach is it?
That is the crown jewel in our campaign, and kind of the best-in-class example of how we activate a top tier athlete. But then we also worked with two other tiers of athletes. I have an example for kind of a tier 2 athlete that we worked with of really activating them on social and creating fit-to-platform content specifically for TikTok. So the example I have is with Sanaya Rivers, who's an athlete with NC State. They had a pretty good run in March Madness this year. If we can roll that.
This is NC State Sanaya Rivers doing this or that with Powerade.
Buzzer beater or overtime victory?
Ooh. Buzzer beater.
Morning practice or evening practice?
Morning practice.
Silencing the away crowd or winning for the home crowd?
Winning for the home crowd.
Red or white unis?
White.
Hot from deep or lockdown deep?
Ooh. Lockdown deep.
A coach who yells or a coach who motivates?
Both. I feel like you could do both at the same time.
Attacking the rim or staying on the perimeter?
Attacking the rim.
Breaking a defender's ankles or locking down the other team's guard?
Locking down the other team's guard.
New career high in points or first career triple-double?
New career in points.
Powerade or Powerade Zero?
Powerade.
So keep in mind, those are all part of the same campaign. So Flaugier, very polished, high production value. I think that might have been shot on an iPhone. That's our social media manager reading her the comments, or reading her the questions. That had almost 1 million views on TikTok. So it performed really well because we created it to speak to our younger target demo. And then I wanted to end with this example, the one on the, your guys' left. Caleb Love from Arizona posted it as a collab post on Instagram, had a 39% engagement rate. Industry benchmark is about 5%. So great example. He was relevant. It was, for that time, very culturally relevant. Performed super well because Arizona was doing well. And then the athlete on your right, Alex Org, he's a quarterback at Michigan. He's not in his marks. You can tell he's on a football field. He was not a collab post. He just posted that on his own. Had a 9% engagement rate. So you don't have to spend all the money and produce this highly produced spot like Flaugier. You can take the different tiered approach. And what we've really found with NIL is that they're so powerful when activated locally. I mean, Alex isn't even in marks, but he has a very loyal fan base. They were excited to see him. They were excited to see him with Powerade, and so they wanted to engage with that. So all it's going to do is reflect well on brand.
I want to take a question here from the audience. This is for you, Sean. What advice do you have for brands who have tried to build NIL relationships with student athletes, but have struggled to maintain longevity, talent retention due to the constant churn of player portal movement?
It's tricky because I think in college, maybe different from pros. Pros generally are coming into whatever league it is as a little bit of a known entity. In college, it takes a little bit of time. There are some exceptions, obviously, but for them to sort of develop themselves, establish themselves. What I would say is, and I know Craig and his team at Playfly are doing the same sort of work that we are, and that is building databases where we can really understand the personalities of these athletes and understand them on a deep level so that we know the ones that prefer, body armor to, maybe coffee or something like that. Exactly. But we've also embedded resources. We're up to, I think, 115 employees that are actually on campuses as NIL leaders or content creators, so that we're building one-on-one relationships with student athletes, working closely with athletic departments to build KPIs to understand what's important to that particular athletic department, that particular university, and that puts us in a better position to advise brands on which athletes might best fit their campaign.
You finding the same thing, Craig?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a good question, and we're not going to be able to affect, anybody up here is not affected the transfer portal, at least not today. So if that's going to be the case and the fluidity of players coming and going, I guess my advice would be, and we do this with some of our partners today, but is to think about franchises that doesn't necessarily count on the player as much as the engagement from fans, or the idea that the concept is strong enough that it's either got a strong presence at the venues or that it has longevity, and invest that way so that you can plug in the next player as they come through campus.
And I think from a brand side, I mean, the reality is the player will go where the player wants to go, right? So at the end of the day, we prepare for that. So are we shooting in uniform and out of uniform? And then do we have something we can switch in? I mean, we had Elliot Cadeau from UNC who went to Michigan. So we had those scenarios, but you prep for them and you're ready for them. So then you're not scrambling at the last minute.
Saw those ads with the Chapel Health player living in Charlotte just a few times. But you know, sticking with you, Mandy, you know, you use a number of student athletes, particularly around March Madness. I think we also have some of the creative that you have used around that time.
Yeah, I think you can run the creative, and I'll just speak over it a little bit. But we have, March Madness is really how we started out with, specifically with NCAA in men's and women's. This is from this year. But we have, like I said, over 30 brands. So we try to pulse in a brand under Marriott Bonvoy. This is Moxie that we brought in. For us, it makes a lot of sense. It's for a younger audience. This is such a huge fan base that we bring here. So we did kicks and drips, if you will, to be able to clean up. We had a professional shoe company come from Miami to clean all of your dunks, et cetera, and bring in your favorite laces, et cetera, from whoever you were cheering for the final. We did this in San Antonio and Tampa. Really, Tampa was, I would say, the crown jewel of our Final Four this weekend, where we took a really different approach in a 360 piece where you'll see huge out-of-home, IFE, like we were in all the airports. We actually had in-flight entertainment, 4 flights going into Tampa showing our media and our broadcast specifically there. And then also we bring it to life with not just for our moments, which are our members, but also for the audience of those fans, that they are the ones that we're trying to market to and gain affinity for. And how do we bring them in via sweeps? So we had a really cool moment right here. You see this young lady is Marriott Bonvoy member. Her daughter, she has the Paige Buckers braids, people. So that was her one dream. We had the NCAA for the first time. They opened in public the Super Saturday practice, which was awesome. It was packed, not a seat open. And we were able to, we had a cool sweeps that we were giving out courtside seats at the Super Side practice for a, oh my God, shooting contest that we had there. And she happened to win with her mom, right? Just totally organic. Then we found out that she is such a huge Paige fan. We have a partnership with Learfield, with UConn, so was able to get her back of the house access. And she had that like very organic moment that I get chills from, and then I'm like, this is why we do this. And so everyone, even at the company, the mom, like they're like, you don't understand how amazing this moment was for her, for us. And that's where I say, like, we don't want to just be seen. We want to be remembered for those moments, and we made that moment happen, so we continue to try to do that. And we do big things like this. So this is really cool. I think location is a big thing for us. We have 6,500 hotels in US and Canada that I'm responsible for, and I need to get heads and beds in those as well. And so one of those mix of that media that we're really trying to look at is like, what are those great destinations that are walkable, that we have a large footprint? We have a ton of hotels in Tampa. So Tampa for us was a heck of a lot easier to activate than Cleveland was, to be very honest, at the end of March. Tampa's very beautiful. People are walking around, they're walking in our hotels, we're pulling it through in our hotels. So we took this incredible out-of-home space to win courtside seats, and this is right outside the arena. So if you've been to Tampa, you're literally overlooking at this. You couldn't have missed it. That really helped us to be able to be more present in the market.
Trish, 160/90 is helps out big brands in the college space. You mentioned Allstate, very ubiquitous with college sports. So how are you helping all of your brand partners kind of adapt to this new NIL landscape?
We've been helping them since the rule passed in 2021, and it seems like each year we're getting more confident. And it used to be scary. It used to be, oh shoot, from a compliance standpoint, are we doing this the right way? But like an Allstate, as for example, you heard Elizabeth Brady from the stage yesterday say they activate sponsorships with purpose. So back in 2021, they looked at their Allstate AFCA Good Works team, which recognizes 22 college football student athletes that excel from a community service standpoint, and awarded each of those 22 student athletes with an NIL deal. And so what that enabled them to do is put a spotlight on that individual student athlete and put a spotlight on that student athlete's community service and charity, and hopefully inspire in the local communities others to model that leadership behavior. And so since then, they've announced more Good Works teams. So we've got Holly Rowe as a partner. They've got NACDA as a partner, so it's the Allstate NACDA Good Works team. Just did the winter team this year, the spring team this year. We'll do a fall team this year. So what that's doing is putting that spotlight on even more student athletes, men and women, so beyond just football, across all the divisions. So hopefully, we are, or Allstate is, inspiring, younger generations and others to give back. So, it's finding your lane to activate in, how to use NIL, more and more across the marketing mix, whether it's TV spots with the likes of Marriott and Invesco QQQ using their marks and NIL deals where they can. Allstate worked closely with the Notre Dame team to not put just one student athlete from an NIL perspective in a national TV spot, but the entire starting five of the women's basketball team, and use the IP and use the arena from Notre Dame, and pretty well received TV spots. So you'll see big brands getting more comfortable a couple years now down the road across the marketing mix involving NIL, and it's just gonna keep evolving and keep, it's safe now, and student athletes, they have engaging big audiences, so it only makes sense for brands to go there.
Greg, you've had a bunch of big wins lately, new schools, Texas A&M, others, but something that you've started to install more of are these, dedicated NIL-specific roles focused on corporate partners. These didn't exist before. Is this something that is now just going to be like standard operating procedure?
I think it has to be. I think at the end of the day, we have obligations to serve and drive, as I said earlier, as much revenue as we can on their multimedia rights assets. So everything from their local radio and digital to the idea of all their signage and IP. And that ascension is going to happen no matter what. And I can share a little bit on a couple data points. The other is, by the way, I only have 50 slides. It's going to be, I'll go quick. Just a couple slides, actually. But you can just see that things like this are helping drive that decision, Austin, is that I know I got a lot of friends out there in our pro team space. That doesn't mean pro is bad. It means it's indexing super high, but college index is just above it on a lot of key metrics for marketers. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what you're paying for, is for that avidity. And if that avidity means something, then how do you take time to create new events and opportunities for those to get into the space in more meaningful ways than they had in the past? And for fans, again, it wasn't that long ago that we had no access to these players. And now you're talking about women athletes, male athletes in some of the non-core sports that are getting lots of opportunities for exposure. Just on this slide real quickly, just to give you a little context again, that bottom right-hand side. So the NFL is obviously a juggernaut, but that does not mean that our Division I schools, those are Power 4 schools, average multimedia rights revenues that are coming in. There's a significant disparity. So there's a tremendous, we talk about the undervalued nature of college, and we've got some brands who have obviously invested into the college space and heard and seen the benefit of it. Doesn't mean that the pros have to go backwards, but there's no reason today that a 109,000 seat stadium at LSU and every one of their venues basically filled across their various varsity sports should be undervalued to the teams 60 miles south of them in New Orleans. There's a real opportunity for growth for brands to come in and help support this initiative to grow faster. So to your NIL portion of that question, yes, I think you have to have dedicated teams, the way that Sean was described before, really concentrating on how they can come up with really meaningful ways. That clearinghouse is going to be interesting. And the in-kind, for what you're going to pay a student athlete, it needs to be super sophisticated, and we got to get there quickly.
I want to get into some women's sports. Mandy, Marriott was obviously huge in Oklahoma City around the College World Series, you all being an NCAA sponsor. I mean, the interest was there, obviously. You look at the TV numbers, record Women's College World Series, record Game 1, record Game 2. And I was shocked. I mean, I deal with numbers all the time on TV, and seeing the number for that Game 3 at 2.4 million viewers when it was like 5-0 in the first inning, I was really shocked to see that was the most watched NCAA softball game ever. So like, why did this particular event though make sense for you?
So, it's not just softball. I think we're really trying to do a always-on approach with NCAA. We are trying to look at our sponsorship with NCAA and how, where can we go in as far as we can with the budgets that we have. And we obviously can't do all 90-plus championships, but there are some that make a lot of sense for us. I think College World Series, we actually started 2 years ago, and we were on the ground, did great activations. This year, we really brought to life and spent more in the media because College World Series is also 2 weeks long. So it's a long time for a brand to be on the ground. From a budget perspective, that we also found great in-stadium media placements that we actually ran also our 30-second spot during media we actually bought in the upfront specifically for that. And then that's just the culmination in the beginning. This week, actually, our team's at women's track and field. And so we are looking to see, and which we're owning that event because there's absolutely no other partner there. And we're finding these opportunities where make really sense for our brand. We actually are pulsing through the Weston brand there. We have a big run concierge with the Weston brand. We have partnership with Hyper Ice where we're actually doing a shakeout run before the competition. And so we're looking to say, how can we make sure that we are growing more in women's sports, but not just basketball, but these other non-revenue sports opportunities as well. And I think some of the other brands have mentioned this, where we can also cut through. I don't have the same budget as a Cap One. So where can I make sure that we can bring meaningful value that really, again, represents our brand, but also supports this? And I think the reason why, back to your question of why College World Series, why track and field, why volleyball, we know in our industry that 82% of travel decisions are actually made by women. And they are expecting by 2028, I see lots of nods.
Checks.
By 2028, they're actually projecting that 75% of all discretionary income decisions are being also made by women. So for us, it's not just, again, I said I'm a college athlete mom, so I have a bias that I have a big passion about it, but also it's good business for us, makes a lot of sense for our industry. We have a footprint of 6,500 hotels. We're in all of the neighborhoods of these universities already. So for us, it's a simple decision, and it's how do we continue to be always on all year, and not just in March Madness and football, but those spaces all throughout the year so other people can remember us. And I'll end with this. I got an email this week from College World Series from a customer that actually came up through our CEO and said, random customer to our CEO, Tony, and said, I was watching College World Series like you were and saw Marriott Bonvoy logo. I am an ambassador member, been a customer for 20 some years. I had no idea that you guys were there and sponsored with us, and I am so proud. And those are like, again, the warm and fuzzy moments where you're like, yes, this makes a lot of sense. And it's not a huge lift for us to also be in these spaces.
It's incredible the number of eyeballs that are now on those properties. We had Holly Rowe on our podcast talking about, she remembers when they were just praying to get 1 million viewers. Now, 2x, 3x that sometimes. Leah, you saw the value in the NCAA women's tournament, and you're like, we're going to pump a lot more money into our budget for that. Easy decision?
Oh, probably the easiest decision we made all of last year. So we increased our media budget for March Madness versus last year, and it was really to lean into the women's side of the tournament. We created that flagey spot for the women's side of the tournament. We had initially planned to run it with some waiting on the men's side. And the first airing was right after the St. John's loss. I live in New York, so it was a tough loss. And I was actually at a restaurant when the spot aired, and everyone stopped what they were doing and watched the TVs, which was a really like goosebumps moment. And we were immediately trending on Twitter with overwhelmingly positive feedback. So we pretty much immediately called up our media agency and then reweighted that Flage spot to run more heavily on the men's side, which just goes to show it's not linear, it's not separate anymore. I mean, the t-shirts and stickers, everybody watches women's sports, is so true and is so prevalent across college sports. And we know from our media agency that March Madness, the women's side of the March Madness tournament for next year, inventory is already more sold out this year than it was at any point last year. So it's a trend that's only going to continue to grow.
I want to take a question here from the audience. We've used the word tasteful several times up here. What have been great examples to you all about where brands have tastefully integrated into college venues in particular that enhances the event experience? Jump ball.
I'm trying to think, like, I didn't even realize we used the word tasteful up here, but I guess someone did. But, I think, again, it's the meaningful moments for us. So wherever, probably I would say one of my favorite moments was this year at Final Four at women's. Again, we had all of these like fans of these little young basketball fans, because they opened up all those practices. They're all downtown Tampa. They're all hitting all of our activations and in our hotels, and seeing that we actually were able to do something that they cared about, that was cool, right? Like, who doesn't want to bling out their kicks? It was just totally on point. So, and we worked with 160 with that, and it was just a really cool event that we loved. I think that was helpful for our brand. It mattered to them. They remembered us. So for me, that was a big win for us.
I think, just quickly, I think we've all talked about storytelling a lot the last couple of days, and a couple that come to mind for me are one, Abbott Laboratories across the Big Ten with blood drives on campus around sporting events. I think is a very tasteful integration of a brand. And then we did a lot of work this past year with Kingsford, and they did a tailgate tour across 15 or 18 schools, that again is on point, on strategy, and I think a tasteful integration for those brands.
Yeah, I think those are good examples. For me, we have a couple, and I think it's executed on a lot of campuses, but the idea of bringing people who are tailgating on Saturdays on non-tentpole events, but just tailgating, and getting them closer to the venue and giving them a reason to do so. So enhancing that pregame experience and making sure that you're programming it with enhancements that brands can participate in, whether it's concerts before and up against the stadiums, things along those lines. We had fun with one with Derek Queen, not Dairy Queen, but Derek Queen, and as he hit the game-winning shot in the NCAA tournament, and within 36 hours we had him shooting a commercial and participating with our friends at Dairy Queen. So that felt good, it felt right, and it hit big. So.
I want to get one final question out there for everybody. Usually I'll ask this like, oh, what are you watching over the next year? I don't think we have that kind of time with how fast this is all moving. So we're at the end of this school year. As we head into the 25-26 school year, what is the biggest thing in the business of college sports that you're really paying attention to? Andy.
I'm a data geek and through, so I think like how we're using AI and doing really dynamic social, productive ads that are really programmatic to the consumer in more real time. Like, I'm curious to see how that really is being pulled through a little bit more with the insights as well from the college side.
Leah?
Well, the LA Olympics are fast approaching, and I think in Paris it was something like 75% of Team USA competed at a collegiate level. So the next Sha'Carri Richardson could be starting her college career this fall. So I'm excited to watch the pipeline of athletes for our LA Olympic summer sports.
Great.
I'll go two. I think one, I don't think this is a big statement, but the athletic director might be the worst job in sports right now, or maybe the hardest.
Tough gig.
Let's put it that way. And watching what they can do to help influence and make the transfer portal more manageable. So I don't know what that change is, but make that something that feels better than it does today, to the fans, to the universities, to the student athletes. Second one, I think business-wise, You've talked a lot about the house settlement. We haven't really got into some of the particulars, but if you sort of think about this idea of this clearinghouse, there are going to be some legal battles over the course of the next year. And so just watching that all play out until we sort of settle into what we all believe is a more normalized process is going to be interesting.
You watching, Trish?
Along similar lines, how are we going to implement this house settlement? What'll be the implications for the transfer portal? Will there be contracts that athletes sign that bound them to the university for a longer term, that make the transfer portal a little bit less fluid like it was this past season? I'm looking at maybe the impact to some of the cuts, if we'll see it hit the women's sports, or if it'll just be resource changes and allocations, but less cutting of sports. So from a Title IX perspective or from a female athlete perspective, I'm kind of watching that.
I think we've already seen some Title IX lawsuits coming out today, so yeah, we're on the right track there.
I'm with Trish and Craig. I think, I look forward to some stability in this world of college athletics. I came from the world of men's professional golf, which may be the only other place with sort of greater uncertainty over the last few years than college athletics. And these changes need to take place, but in a world of uncertainty, that's not always attracting brands to a place and into college athletics. So I think that the more we can take confusion, complexity, I said it at the beginning, those types of things out of this, demystify it in a way that makes it just more accessible for brands to want to engage, because it is an incredibly valuable audience. It is an incredibly valuable platform, and we need to sort of break down any barriers that would stand in the way of a brand considering coming in.
I'm pretty sure we could sit up here and talk for another week or so just about issues related to college sports. So I want to thank you all for taking the time to come this afternoon and chat about it. And I'm going to pass it to Abe Madcore.